Hey folks, I'm David McKnight, best-selling author of The Power Zero. In today's video, you'll see part 3 of my interview with Power Zero advisor Terry Dupont, in which we discuss the date by which you must complete your Roth conversion or potentially lose hundreds of thousands of dollars to massively higher taxes.
You mentioned that taxes are going to have to drastically increase by the year 2030. That's kind of like the drop dead point, if you will. But what most people fail to remember is it starts before that, doesn't it? Like in about a little over 2 years.
Yeah, so they're starting January 1st, 2026. We know that the tax sale of a lifetime is chapter 6 of my book, The Power Zero. I call it the tax sale of a lifetime, which really is referring to the Trump tax cuts. Those expire. So that tax cut that Trump pushed through was not a permanent tax cut. It was run through under budget reconciliation, which means it had an 8-year horizon, which means it expired after 8 years. That happens in 2026. That means that between now and then, we basically have 3 tax years within which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. And every year that goes by where you fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2026 in which you could pay those higher tax rates, which is what we experienced in 2017 and earlier. Now, frankly, those tax rates will go up on the margin. So for example, if you're in the 22 currently, that goes up to 25. If you're in the 24, that goes up to 28. That is it's an increase on the margin. But what I'm worried about, which you mentioned, is I'm really worried about what happens in 2030. David Walker, former Comptroller General of the federal government, in his book, Come Back America, he predicted that by 2030, tax rates would have to double or more, okay, to keep our country solvent, to pay for unfunded obligations for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and interest on the national debt. So when you think of your tax bracket going from 22 to 25, not such a big deal, or 24 to 28, not the end of the world. But when you think about your 22% tax bracket going to 44, for example, that could start to approach an apocalyptic scenario for you. And so really, we're telling people, yes, you got 3 years or so to take advantage of the historically low tax rates, but you have another 5 years beyond that or so to take advantage of still relatively low tax rates before we feel like that tax freight train is really going to slam down on America.
Yeah. And it amazes me. And I guess it does and it doesn't, that in talking with families and individuals, they don't understand or they don't have their arms around or appreciate the damage that the largest expense in their lifetime will continue to be the largest expense of their lifetime. And they don't calculate it in, if they calculate it all, into their future their future income, and what those higher taxes can do to, in some cases, really devastate their retirement and force them to run out of money years ahead of their life expectancy in many cases.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, I said, when you put money into a 401k or IRA, now keep in mind, you should have some money in your 401k and IRA, because you will have that standard deduction. And if you don't have any money in your tax deferred bucket, then your standard deduction sits idle and you won't be able to use it. So you will have unnecessarily paid taxes on some of your money along the way. So it's okay to have some money. You just don't want to have all of your money. And so I tell people that when you put money into your 401k or IRA, it's like going into a business partnership with the IRS. And every year they get to vote on what percentage of your profits they get to keep. Not a very good business partnership, if you ask me. So for example, you could have $1 million in your IRA, but unless you can accurately predict what tax rates are going to be in the year you take that money out, you don't really know how much money you have. And it's pretty hard to plan for retirement if you don't know how much money you have.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. David, you've been doing this for a while. What is something that you know now about this whole process, what you're doing, that you wish you knew when you started?
Well, I didn't know very much at all when I started back in 1997. Back in 1997, Bill Clinton stood before the nation in the State of the Union, and he says, "I've got great news, folks." He says the The national debt is only 5 trillion, and the budget is balanced through 2023. Okay, so he says for the next basically 26 years, he says we have budget surpluses. Okay, so we were living, when I got into the financial services industry for the first time, we were living in a completely different world. Now clearly the reason he only went out to 2023 is because it looked good through 2023. He wasn't factoring in the unfunded obligations for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid that catch up with us after 2023. And so I spent, the first 13 years of my career just telling people about how to invest their money, maybe how life insurance retirement plan fits into it, but I didn't really understand the urgency behind why we would want to systematically reposition our dollars to tax-free and to take advantage of historically low tax rates along the way. I didn't really fully wrap my arms around that until I met David Walker. I got to know David Walker. I've gotten to know him personally over the last few years because he appeared in our documentaries, appeared on my podcast. But I watched a piece by him on 60 Minutes. He appeared on 60 Minutes back in 2000. I want to say it was 2007 or 2008. And as part of what he called the fiscal wake up tour, where he's basically, as they said in the piece, he was charging across the country like an Old Testament prophet, raising the warning cry to whoever would listen. And what he said back then, he says, the reason nobody does anything is because there's no immediate crisis. But he says that every year that goes by where you fail to fundamentally and dramatically reform Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, he says that the reality of higher taxes is all the more certain. In fact, he wrote a piece for CNN, I think in 2008 or 9, in which he says, the title of the piece is Why Your Taxes Could Double. Okay, so he was really raising the warning cry way before anybody else was. And of course, he had an Oscar-nominated movie called IOUSA, which really called it out. But you know what? He did the movie and it raised a real ruckus at the time. And then people, frankly, they forgot about it. And so David Walker is still out there raising the warning cry. But this is something that I wish I had known about well before when I actually knew about it. And so now I'm trying to make up for lost time and you know what? It's actually not the end of the world because, people come up to me sometimes at the end of my presentation. They say, Dave, thanks a lot. Now I'm in a really bad mood. I say, why are you in a bad mood? And they say, because I got all my money in the tax deferred bucket. And I said, let me see if I understand this correctly. You contributed money to your tax deferred investments when tax rates were much higher than they are today. You got a deduction at those higher rates for doing so. You now have if you count between now and 2030, you now have an 8-year period of time during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. So that by the time tax rates potentially double over time, you've done all the heavy lifting. You can then take your dollars out tax free. I say, is that why you're in such a bad mood? So really, the timing is perfect for Americans to take advantage of these strategies because they did get deductions at those higher rates. They now are at a period of historically low tax rates, and they have time to get that money repositioned to tax-free before tax rates go up for good. And so this message is really timely. I tell people there's never been a better time in the history of our country to be implementing these strategies.
Yeah, excellent. We're going to start winding down here in a moment, but David, could you tell me, and our audience, obviously, how you define success?
I think I define success by how many people I can help, right? And a lot of people define it in monetary ways, but really money is a function of how many people you help. And so that's why I've tried to quantify our mission at Power of Zero in terms of how many people we can help, how many people we can put on the road to the 0% tax bracket. So if over the next 10 years we can put, or through my organization, we can help put 100,000 Americans on the road to the 0% tax bracket, then I will have considered this next decade or so as a success.
Great. David, is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about already?
I guess my final thoughts would simply be this, that if you believe that tax rates in the future are likely to be dramatically higher than they are today, and you have significant amounts of money in your tax deferred bucket, that you should be mindful that while we are enjoying historically low tax rates, they haven't always been this low. Post World War II, they were as high as 94%. As recently as the 70s, they were as high as 70%. So we're sort of at this artificially low period of tax rates. And sometimes we have this, what I call illusion of linearity. Tax rates are low now, therefore they're going to continue to be low forever. Whereas if you zoom back and see that, wow, tax rates have been much higher in the past than they are today, and everybody's predicting that they're likely to go up. Nobody thought interest rates would go up, but here we are. They've risen as dramatically as we've seen them ever rise. So tax rates can do the same thing. So I guess my final concluding thought would be, don't let a year go by where you fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates, because every year that goes by where you fail to take advantage of historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2030 when you could be paying double. You don't want to miss out on the tax sale, and then when they return to previous levels or even rise dramatically, you have that regret of not having cashed in while tax rates were historically low. Okay, folks, that was part 3 of my interview with Power Zero advisor Terry Dupont. If you would like some help implementing a balanced, comprehensive approach to tax-free retirement that shields you from the impact of higher taxes down the road, head on over to davemcknight.com and click on the Connect with an Advisor button. I'm happy to refer you to an advisor in the Power Zero network that has been trained, vetted, and qualified personally by me. If you're a financial professional and want to learn how to become a certified Power Zero advisor, head over to powerzero.com and opt into my free video series. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them into the comment section below. I'll respond to every single one of them personally. And don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the bell so you never miss a video. This is Dave McKnight. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.